Hi, hello everyone. Hello. I'm Cynthia Smith, curator of By the People Designing a Better America exhibition that's currently on display on both the first and the third floors of the museum. It's on display now until February 26, 2017. If you've not had an opportunity to see it, please do so. It includes 60 designs from around the United States that address complex issues of social and spatial inequalities in urban, suburban, and rural communities. Design responses range in scale from the entire city of Detroit to a mobile health app for expectant mothers. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and welcome to Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. We are the only museum in the U.S. devoted exclusively to design. The talk this evening is the first of several we have scheduled while the exhibition is on display. The next, Design Night, New York, presented by Autodesk and Cooper Hewitt, takes place January 12th, and Defiant Jewelry with Rebel Nell is on January 26th. I have a couple more. We haven't scheduled those, and another one with IBM. And if you've signed up, we'll be sure to send out a notice to you when we get those dates. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. By the People is made possible by the generosity of the Ford Foundation, with additional support provided by Elizabeth and Lee Ainsley Dutchbank, Gensler, the Lily Auchinclose Foundation, the Rudin Family Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, Autodesk, and the Horace W. Goldsmith Foundation. I always like to say that By the People was definitely supported by the people. We had so many wonderful sponsors. And a very, very special thanks to IBM, who provided major support of the exhibition and with whom we collaborated on the Designing Resilience colleague workshop that took place earlier today and who is supporting the program tonight. Many thanks. Tonight, I'm delighted to have several individuals whose important work is included in By the People. They're here to help us explore how design might address mounting climate challenges. We have Laura Baird from OMA, who will discuss Resist, Delay, Store, Discharge Urban Water Strategy. Red Hook Wi-Fi Digital Steward, Robert Smith, and Dorn Cox, one of the founders of FarmHack. And to moderate the Designing Resilience program tonight, we have Richard Michos, the head of communication strategies for IBM's Smarter Cities initiatives, along with quite a number of other things. His resume is quite long. So without further ado, I give you Richard.
Thank you, Cynthia. I actually did work at IBM for the beginning of what we called Smarter Cities, which was a project that stemmed from an initiative that we had around something we called Smarter Planet, which several years ago was inspired by the idea that the intersection of technology and society could change industries and it could change lives. And so as we pursued that, we realized that, well, that's lofty. It's very hard to implement something at the planetary level. So we brought it down to the city level. And we realized that with all of the instrumentation and data and infrastructure that existed, it was quite possible now that departments, transportation, and water and safety and the like, emergency management, could integrate all of the data they had to make much better and more informed decisions. And that was kind of the genesis of the project, and it's continued on in many ways now, because now data, of course, is becoming more prolific, and the ability to access data and glean insights from the data is what's really changing in everything we're doing in this context and around the world in industry and technology and in, of course, not-for-profit. So it's an exciting time to really be talking about something like this. And I just wanted to add, because we're going to hear from some wonderful people in a moment. I'll tell you how the night is going to work, and we'll keep it moving. But the thing that I noticed when I worked with cities around the world, whether it was in Detroit or Toronto or Miami or Johannesburg or Istanbul or in South Asia, there were always good ideas. The thing that was tricky is it required a couple of things. A strategy to address some of the most compelling problems that were facing the municipality, the community, the country. But it took visionary leaders who had the idea to not only set up the idea that there was something important to be done, but then to find something that could be started. I always used to say, in the most simplistic fashion, think long, but start short. And the reason for that, I guess maybe more eloquently, think ahead but act now, is because you can get a quick victory. You can get people rallying around something where you can demonstrate success. And in doing so, many times leaders are political people, so in doing so, you have to be able to rally people to support you, and you don't have a lot of time to do that. But what's really the key, and what you're going to see here, is those leaders know they have to get the collaboration, and they don't have to be public officials, by the way. They can be community members. They can be academia. They can be not-for-profit. They can be an organization that convenes people that have a common interest, such as Cooper Hewitt and the Smithsonian at large. And the trick is, people care because they generally are part of the very community that they're working in. They live there, they work there, they play there, they learn there, they worship there, whatever the case may be. And that inspires people to action because, we're all in this together, whether it's a city or whether it's the planet. So designing for climate change is really not just a lofty educational egalitarian concept. It's very real, and it means something to every individual. And you're going to see 3 people tonight that will bring that home. We have Laura Baird in the Office of Metropolitan Architecture, and she's going to talk to you about a variety of things, as Cynthia said, but they are demonstrating leadership in energy policy and public policy and in the design, in metropolitan design, buildings and the like. And I can only say that having recently been out in Vancouver, British Columbia, and seeing TELUS Gardens. TELUS is a telecommunications company in Canada. They built the most magnificent building. And not only is it wonderfully and environmentally sound, and it's extraordinarily economical and efficient, it's inspirational. And people come as I think it may be the only or the first LEED compliant building in that part of the world or in that part of Canada, but nonetheless, being there was inspirational. You're going to hear from Robert Smith, who not only is one of the inspirations behind Red Hook Wi-Fi and helping a neighborhood prosper and thrive in times of adversity, but in his spare time he also was a Google intern, among other things, so another world changer. And then Dorn Cox, who recognized the idea of open source. It's not just about code, it's about collaborating across a wide array of people with a common interest, using the internet and technology to do that, sharing. I will let him explain what FarmHack does, but the idea that you can design tools for very specific needs and share them across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, it's pretty remarkable. So we're going to be inspired tonight, and I'm just happy to be here. We'll hear from each of our panelists, then I'll come up with them and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A, and we'll involve you as well. So let's begin. Laura.
Thanks. And thanks so much to Susanna and Cynthia and those for including us in the exhibition and inviting us here tonight. We're really excited to be here. So I'm going to tell you about a project that we're continuing to work on in Hoboken, New Jersey. It's called Resist, Delay, Store, Discharge. It was initiated by it was initiated post-Hurricane Sandy, actually, through a competition called Rebuild by Design. And what happened after Hurricane Sandy is trauma and the stress and the damage that was caused, the tri-state area decided we need to find ways to be more resilient. So they hosted a design competition with the end goal to receive funding from HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And we participated, having been actively affected by Sandy. So this on the left, you can see our office in Soho. On the right, the makeshift office we had to open in Brooklyn in someone's apartment because we had a deadline the following day. So the blackout, we just kept on moving, kept pushing forward, and witnessed the aftermath of it all. So, you know, pre-Sandy or during Sandy, the hashtags were about the superstorm and following, and the fear that was associated with it and the unknown. Following, things really started to turn, and people believed in the ability to come up with resilient solutions. And we were really fortunate that Rebuild by Design as a competition empowered designers to be the ones to come up with this solution. So we participated as part of an interdisciplinary team. We were looking at building and city as well as stakeholder and audience participation. We had a firm looking at water management, another firm looking at ecology and landscape, and then an economic analysis to accompany the strategies that we were proposing to make sure they were feasible in some way. The thing is about any kind of event or storm like this is that flood risk is actually a result of probability times consequence, and it's usually the inverse of what you think would happen. We identified Hoboken and the areas directly adjacent, Weehawken and Jersey City, as our study area. Hoboken is actually originally an island, so the flooding issues are prevalent in the sense that the edges of it are are a much lower topography than the center. So the propensity to flood is much higher. So it was somewhere that we identified that would always deal with this problem. The idea of building a wall to simply protect the land, the higher land, from the water and from the coastal storm surge is a little bit out of the budget that we were considering. And we were fortunate when we reached out to Hoboken to ask if we could collaborate them on proposing a strategy, that the mayor and her team were very, very open to this conversation and were willing to help us facilitate this discussion and proposal by folding some of the things that we were doing into their own initiative. So we actually had some real help on the ground in Hoboken, also in Weehawken and Jersey City from the municipal bodies there. So what our proposal does is it addresses two separate things, the flash flood versus the storm surge. So the storm surge is mainly coastal, so it's what happens during an event such as Sandy, which comes from the coast, which comes from the river primarily, as opposed to flash flood, which can happen in really any rain event. So the thing about the study area that we're looking at, primarily Hoboken, is that it was a combination of the flash flood and the storm surge in this particular event. In implementing a resilient strategy, you also need to address either or, because if you only address the coastal storm surge, the interior of the study area would not receive any of these flood reduction benefits that we're talking about. 2/3 of Hoboken lies in the FEMA flood zone. So this was in addition to being about the actual resilient strategy and trying to reduce flooding, we were also looking at reducing things like insurance premiums for the residents of the city. Storm surge was 5 feet above the existing bulkhead during Sandy, so they felt a huge amount of just impact and resultant damage following the storm. 50,000 daily users go through the Hoboken train station, the PATH station, as well as local transport, so it was a huge public transport node. And the vulnerabilities are quite extensive. So what our proposal did, or what we tried to do, was to have a multi-component system, which in and of itself, the components are actually quite small, but the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So we have 4 parts: resist, delay, store, and discharge. Resist is basically your protection against your coastal storm surge. So this is building some kind of flood barrier in the coastal situations where you have along the water the storm surge that comes from the water, from the river. This can be in the form of a terraced edge, a bulkhead, a deployable flood wall. There's a lot of different solutions. Delay is essentially delaying water from entering into the sewer system. So you can do this actually generally using green infrastructure. Either you have a park, a green roof, a bioswale that simply holds the water for a temporary period of time and delays it from entering into the storm system, so your sewers have time to drain and you prevent the results of the flash flooding. Store is a similar strategy to delay the water from entering the sewer system, but this time through actual storage tanks. So a cistern or a bioretention basin, even constructed wetlands can fulfill this purpose. And then discharge is simply getting the water out of the sewer system as quickly as you can, so using a stormwater pump or a storm drain. So as I mentioned, this was a really comprehensive strategy where we attacked from these 4 different sides to produce a comprehensive strategy that would address the study area as a whole: residence, delay, store, discharge. So what you see as a result of the competition here, this is the part of the study area that was flooded, for example, during Sandy, during a 100-year storm event. With resist, you reduce this already quite a lot. However, you have the flash flooding in addition to the coastal storm surge. So you still have flooding on the interior of the site. But with delay, that gets reduced through the green infrastructure that you implement. With store, through the storage basins, it's reduced even more. And with discharge, you can discharge the water out more quickly, and you come to normalize much faster. We submitted this project, or this proposal, at the tail end of the competition, Rebuild by Design. We had also approached a number of stakeholders. So this is very interesting. When Cynthia was giving her opening remarks, she talked about a little bit, and Richard as well, how designers and how others, the actors, right, in the whole proposal. So in addition to ourselves and our great interdisciplinary team, we approached a number of different stakeholders that would be really interested in this proposal, that would benefit from this proposal in some way, and therefore would support our bid to turn this into a real project somehow. So this ranged from senatorial and federal government bodies down to municipal bodies, down to individual stakeholders and community members themselves. We were overwhelmed by the support we received. We reached out to them in a number of different ways, so the tools and the communication tools became a really important part of this project. This is in a way can be quite a dense subject that's a little bit hard to access. So figuring out through pamphlets, through working sessions, how you can actually engage with the stakeholders is equally as important to identifying who they might be. So our engagement strategies were very, very diverse and very, very extensive. In the end, when we submitted our proposal, we received letters of support from over 62 different organizations, government bodies, et cetera, which combined with our proposal when it was presented to the jury, the Rebuild by Design jury, the letters of support were included. We also had a small exhibition with our kind of panels and the model, which is actually included in the exhibition upstairs that you can see here, where we were able to explain what we were doing. So if you haven't already, take a moment to go see the model. It's really fun, kind of very interactive explanation of what's happening. We were awarded $230 million in federal money to build our project, which was a kind of amazing feat. We were recognized by the UN, well, Hoboken was recognized by the UN as a kind of model for resilience on the basis of adopting this plan and trying to push it forward. So that was really exciting. That was at the tail end kind of 2014. So beginning in 2015, we really thought, oh my gosh, we have to implement this now. We really have to do it. So we started with a kind of new team based on the approvals, the environmental process that was needed. We had to bring more people on board. We diversified a little bit. We've been working since June of last year on the first phase of this, which is essentially we're in this kind of 2-year period, which is a feasibility study. We're also going through the NEPA process, which means we have to draft an environmental impact statement saying, this was our concept. The feasibility study is to say, how do we make that a little bit more concrete? What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like in a kind of, at a kind of concept design level? And then on the basis of that concept design, submitting an environmental impact statement, basically saying that we're doing more good than bad. That's the shortest way to explain an environmental impact statement. It's a lot more bureaucratic than that, but in its kind of simplest form. So to take on the NEPA process and the feasibility study at the same time is a very unique approach, let's say, but we were given a condition on the money that we were awarded from HUD that the project has to be built and completed by 2022. So we really didn't have a choice. We had to fast track. So what we've been doing over the course of this year is continuing with the public involvement process, going through a stage of establishing the purpose and need, scoping the project, going through the screening criteria, introducing concepts, whittling down to alternatives, and then to a preferred build alternative, which is the result of the feasibility study. We started this process and this engagement by reminding people why we needed the project in the first place. After a little bit of a lull, people tend to have amnesia, I guess. And what happens, the reason people need the project, I'm going to go through this really, really fast because I'm running out of time, but is quite obvious given the introduction that I just gave. The process that we've gone through subsequently, as I said, was to develop 5 concepts for the actual concept design of the project. Those were whittled down to alternatives through a community engagement stage. And then from those 3 alternatives, we selected a preferred build. So delay, store, and discharge, what's happening on the interior, were the same for each of the 3 alternatives. And then the alternatives were just different in the resist component. So we had one that was very protective along the waterfront, one that was a little bit more inland, and one that was another variation on that. This alternative 3 was the one that was selected. It was selected through an extensive engagement with the community as well as our own kind of feasibility assessment and the products that we made through it. We designed some of the specific sites in terms of placemaking versus services. So here's a kind of very obvious park that will be used as part of the delay and store components that's at the north end of Hoboken near Weehawken. There were also some parks proposed along the waterfront, for example, but these were within alternatives that were not selected. For some of the other sites that were more essentially services sites, much thinner, not so much room to work, we have a kind of toolkit that we developed, which this slide is supposed to flip through, but with a lot of different applications, different things that you can apply. So there's different heights. At different heights, you can do different things and have different amenities such as shade, bike parking, garbage storage, things like that. You can also implement different types of green applications or lighting. So really trying to figure out how we could take this very technical proposal and offer a number of community amenities as a really fantastic byproduct. So that's been really fun to kind of explore. And we're continuing to work with the community moving forward on identifying what exactly they want and need. This community engagement process is really the only thing that has enabled the project to move forward. We have a lot of support still from the community and a lot of engagement ongoing. We chose this and announced the preferred build alternative at the end of the summer. Now the EIS is being prepared with alternative 3. And that will be submitted, the draft EIS at the end of the year, and then the final EIS next March, and then the final design will start. So we're really excited for you guys to track as the project continues, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or maybe you'll hear more about it in the context of the panel. Thanks a lot.
Hello, good evening. I'm Robert Smith once again. Before I get started, I just kind of want to set the environment. I myself am a Red Hook resident. I've lived there all 21 years of my life, and this Red Hook Wi-Fi project means a whole lot to me. All right, so Red Hook. I'll just briefly give you guys some statistics about Red Hook. Red Hook is the second largest low housing income facility in New York City. 4 out of 5 Red Hook families are unemployed. More than 40% of Red Hook households are living on less than $10,000 a year. Within the median income of like $16,000 a year. Red Hook Initiative. Red Hook Initiative is a nonprofit organization that solely focuses on the development of young adults in the Red Hook community. They offer a number of services for young adults from the ages of 11 to 24. They offer like educational support, emotional support, social support, and they have this extremely outstanding model of hiring majority of the people that work there are from the community. So with that said, 90% of the staff that work, that's including youth leaders at Red Hook Initiative, are from the Red Hook community. So this is Red Hook Wi-Fi coverage after Sandy. Before Sandy actually hit in Red Hook, Tony Schloss and a couple other people from the community were talking about building a wireless network in the Reddit community. But right when Sandy hit, we saw that like communication was completely down in Red Hook. If you lived in the neighborhood, you like really experienced terrible communication, terrible cellular coverage, all that stuff. So right after the storm, we went up and we put up a couple of antennas. You can see up here, there are like a number of different colors. Those are like all of the devices within the network. But during that time, we had about 5 to 6 hotspots in the Reddit community. And after the storm and after we began to recover, we noticed that this was something that was greatly needed, because when we had it up after the storm, we had even outside resources like the Red Cross using our wireless network, and had residents using it as a means to communicate to their family members. This is our current coverage. So after the storm, we had 5 hotspots. We currently have 15 hotspots throughout the Reddit community. These are all spots that you can pull out your phone and access the internet. And here are like statistics from the beginning of the first 6 months of 2016. These are all pulled from Google Analytics, and these are all like unique users. So these are people that actually like signed on to the network and actually used it for a period of time. All right, the best part, digital stewards. So the digital stewards are a group of young adults from the Reddit community who actually learn about this technology, and they use the skills to maintain this wireless network. And that goes to speak to sort of like the whole reason over here is like resiliency. And it's like not only building a resilient infrastructure, but trying to build resiliency within the people that live in the community. Because regardless of, like for example, Red Hook has like Verizon and Time Warner, but after Hurricane Sandy, it took about a couple of weeks for Verizon and Time Warner to actually get out there and to get some of their equipment up and running. So having a task force that is actually on the ground can ultimately result in a more resilient strategy. Here's the digital steward timeline. So if you are a digital steward, here's sort of what you would go through. Level 1, support workplace expectations and professional development. So as I stated earlier, Reddit Initiative offers a number of things for young adults. So they offer like social support, they help them with finding jobs and all that stuff. So the Digital Stewards program, not only is it like a technology learning program, it's also a job training program. Level 2, they learn like media production and like graphic design. So and with us giving the digital stewards these skills, we're allowed to like build content for the wireless network in-house, so that we don't have to employ people from outside of the neighborhood. Then level 3, they learn about like project management, and then we place them in an internship with tech companies so that they can gain like real-world experience. And yeah. So Reddit Wi-Fi expansion come 2017 and 2018. I know this looks super messy, but come 2017, 2018, we plan to expand our current wireless coverage to like most of Red Hook. We're doing this through 2 separate projects though. The first is we are winners of the New York City Economic Development Corporation RISE NYC project. So with that money that we won from that competition, we'll be building up wireless infrastructure along all of the commercial corridors in Red Hook. And this network has to go specifically to like small businesses in Red Hook. It has to benefit small businesses in Red Hook. So, and then the second way that we're doing this is, since that we built the network, we've received a lot of press about it. So we've been advocating with NYCHA Housing to have them build wireless infrastructure inside and outside of the New York City Housing Authority buildings. And we'll be doing that with a contractor named Sky Packets. So along with building the wireless network, we began to develop some tools in-house to help residents in the community have some type of way to communicate with each other. This is tide pools. We call it our splash page, because when you signed on to if you sign on to any Reddit Wi-Fi access point, you'll have this page that automatically pops up. It'll ask you to like read terms of services, you hit accept, and then you'll be directed to this page. Well, in 2013, you were directed to this page. And on this page, we like posted up events that were going on in the community. We had like just about every local business in the Reddit community. You can see their hours that they were open. If we created content, you can see their location and all that stuff. And then from there on, we just continue to build and help develop different means of communication in the Reddit community. Here's another form of that communication, the Reddit Hub. We partnered up at a hackathon actually with some people from AIGA, and they like pitched this idea to us because they heard about the Reddit Wi-Fi network, and then we met up at a hackathon where we met some software developers that helped them to develop this web page, and then they just gave it to us like a Christmas present. So since then we've been maintaining it. Basically, the Reddit Hub is it's a place where you can post information. You can do it digitally on this web page. That's on the right side, and then we have physical bulletin boards posted throughout the Reddit community. So those that are not tech savvy in no way, they can still have a means to put up events that are going on inside the community. We have all these different colors. Like yellow means like high priority. So there's an admin, a Reddit Hub admin, who oversees all the posts that go onto the website. And if they're like really high priority stuff, then they'll have them in yellow posted on the website, and then they'll print out yellow posters and post them on the bulletin board. And in 2016, so from 2013, you guys saw that like little web page that was pretty simple. In 2015, we redid our splash page. And now on this page, it's slightly more sophisticated. So we're not only posting like events and stuff, but now we can promote and post the content that we create in-house, so that when you sign on to a Reddit Wi-Fi access point, instead of being directed to that old page, you're directed to this page. So now you can learn about the hub. You can learn about where all the local hotspots are inside the community. If you want to say you're looking for one of the best places to eat in Red Hook, there's a good chance that that business is on this web page, and we've created video for them. So before going into that place, you can kind of get a taste of like what the culture is there and what kind of business it is. And this is all created by Digital Stewards, especially that page that I just showed. In 2017, we hope to like create applications in a ways to like increase how we communicate throughout the network. There are like we're not in development currently for the application, but this is like one of the things that we're kind of trying to push to, and we hope can be very feasible once we build the network infrastructure that we want to build. So yeah, with that said, also with a more fully connected community, we believe that Reddit can incubate can be an incubator for smart technologies, such as like open data. We hope that Red Hook can be an incubator for different types of technology, such as like sensing technology, like installing like cameras and stuff, backup systems for like wireless networks and for like many other things. And yeah, we just hope that we can use this network to address a lot of other problems inside the Reddit community. And yeah, so these are questions that we're asking ourselves for the future. You know, what is the best financial mode to sustain Reddit Wi-Fi? What model maximizes positive impact on low-income residents of Red Hook? How can Red Hook Wi-Fi be replicated in other low-income communities in New York City? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dorn Cox, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm a farmer and agriculturalist, and I'm particularly excited about this theme because it allows me to talk not just about FarmHack as a platform for hacking hardware and tools, but to give you some of the background around why we created FarmHack and the motivations. Because really FarmHack is about agriculture and its intersection with society. So agriculture, culture of the field, which means people. It's not just about farming. Hack is an interesting term that we chose very deliberately because it's about individual adapting the current situation to individual purposes locally. But what we're really talking about is transformation of agriculture, so moving from hacks to tools, and that involves communicating and finding what works and adapting it. And what we found is that agriculture, we have an interest collectively in improving the quality of agriculture, and that's what I'm going to talk a lot about. And as we understand that common interest, I think we can see the advantages of having every farm as a research farm and being able to adapt from that global knowledge to our local production. And I think the other thing, and we're realizing, and I think FarmHack is an expression of the realization of the advantages of sharing and creating a pre-competitive space and the pace at which we can innovate and how that's affected by the systems and the communities and by sharing that basic knowledge. So let me just step in and make the link to climate change and resilience. What we have here is a slide of two different soils. They're within miles of each other. They're actually the same they're the same soil. The difference between the two is management. Management is people. It's what we choose to do with that. And what we've realized actually just relatively recently, we always thought that we just degrade soil. In fact, the USDA they had a after the Soil Conservation Service was created. Now here, that conservation service, not soil growing service, not soil building service. It was soil conservation. There was a lack of recognition that we can actually grow new soil. And if we're thinking about economic resilience in relationship to, or in relationship to climate change, soil is a really big piece of that. And it's improving the quality of our soil, the soil health, because it's a living system, is what we need to do to both adapt to climate change, but also to mitigate the effects of climate change. Just to give you a sense of sort of the scale, if we were to take global atmospheric carbon from pre-industrial levels and put it back into the soil, that would be 6 inches of dark topsoil just like this across the entire Sahara, or 8 feet deep across all of the United States agricultural soils. And healthy soils, high organic matter soil is able to carry 20 times its weight in water. So if we're thinking about, again, this urban rural connection with flood management and drought management, agricultural soils are critical to that. And we have not done a great job of that. This is a man-made soil degradation map, the dark being, of course, the most degraded soils. So this is a shared climate issue, but it's also a shared economic and resilience issue. So open farms. FarmHack, again, is founded around the idea that every farm has the potential to be a research farm, and that we have the ability to learn from each farm and improve every farm. And that we believe that every farmer should actually have access to the best tools available, the best knowledge available, and that they shouldn't be competing on that basis. And so our process and of building an in-person and online community is about building a process to exchange the knowledge and the observations that we make on our farms. And tools, again, are a reflection of our understanding of our environment. And I'll say that again throughout, because I think that's one of the most important things that we're concerned with. The tools that we create, the tools that we use, are a reflection of our understanding of the environment that we're living. And so the more we can understand the context and share, the better our tools. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. But what we're creating really is a public observatory. If you think about science, we often think about lab science, special people in special places. But what we're talking about is more of an observational science, like when you think about a space program, where we're deploying sensors into and we have lots of different participants who are looking at all of the data, all of this process, to collectively explore and come up with better solutions. And it's really important to think about this as part of an ongoing progress, that the best agriculture, we all benefit from it, and it is never achieved. It's a constant evolving process of better understanding our environment. And so what we're looking at doing here is understanding, so looking at the metaphor of a tree as being for culture, for our society. This is very much an Enlightenment idea, that agriculture at the roots, we have society as the trunk, and we have arts and commerce as the leaves and branches. And if a storm comes through, the leaves and branches may blow off, but they'll regrow. But if the roots are attacked, the entire tree will wither and die. So it's a living metaphor for our cultural systems. And so what we're looking at doing, the tools we're using are the action. We often pay attention to is the tools that we're actually using to affect the environment. So the plow, the seeds we plant, that's the action. But those are informed by all these other processes. Observation, analysis, and communication, and developing those tools along, because that informs this adaptive process of better understanding our environmental systems. We get better data, we have better monitoring tools, we have better systems understanding, and we have better management of our environmental systems. And so we can create, instead of a downward spiral of environmental degradation that we've seen in agriculture and soils, we can have this positive feedback loop of improved soil, organic matter, improved production at lower cost. And biological systems, instead of, that can substitute productively instead of diesel, steel, and labor. And so we have Farm Hack, which is a process of taking that design process and turning it into a social process of social exchange, of creating, mixing, sharing, growing, eating, and drinking, and creating a network where it's the creativity that's on the ground is a social process and creates linkages between people at the most basic level. And it's not a new idea. This is an illustration from an earlier agrarian movement, 1918, with a community club at the center. And it's a circulatory system of knowledge and inspiration. I think that's really critical. And this goes back as far as the history of agriculture. It was this idea of shared knowledge exchange. We have new tools to follow the same process, this circulatory system, this metabolism of knowledge and inspiration. And that's what we have here. And the object that is displayed upstairs is a representation of action, a tool itself, but also the communications tool to reach the global community and analysis to adapt that tool. And this is just an expression in process. It's not an end tool. It's an expression of our understanding of the problems we're trying to solve. But other tools that have been developed through the open source community are things like this roller crimper. So it's a tool that rolls down a cover crop into a living mulch in one pass. And it can do this without herbicides because of the knowledge that this crop that was planted is weak at a particular point in time in its growth cycle. So it allows its knowledge, it's a tool, a physical piece of steel that relies on detailed biological understanding. And that substitutes for labor, it substitutes for chemicals, and it substitutes for diesel. And it's adding tons of carbon back into the soil at the same time, and storing water. So this also reflects the observation tools are also part of this democratizing process of observation and using the tools that we now have available in the internet and drop in cost of part of the fourth industrial revolution of lower cost sensors and communication systems and so forth to create inexpensive, findable, accessible, reusable, replicable, modular tools that can be widely used and reflected in mobile apps that democratize, again, bring the scale down of complex systems that previously we have large industrial systems partly because the cost of these systems has been prohibitive, so we needed to build them bigger. Part of this revolution in observation and communications technology has enabled the reduction in scale of agricultural systems and democratizing a lot of this process and environmental understanding. So this is a lot of what we're moving towards is not just the physical tools that you see when you go to the FarmHack website, but a lot of the social exchange and environmental observation tools that are really revolutionizing our place and putting things that were formerly in the hands of large governments in the hands of the individual. These kinds of images are done with $30 cameras and a $100 balloon and open source software. So we can share these this kind of information anywhere on Earth and share analysis and conversations about what to do and create, this was just to point that this process of documentation is a very old process. This image on the left is a documentation of grain threshing equipment in Diderot's Encyclopédie from 1750s. And they were trying to accomplish the same thing with a printing press. And now we're able to replicate that and scale the equipment, take extinct designs and cross-pollinate them, turn them into 3D models, remanufacture, share those libraries, share the skills about how to reproduce these. This is in Quebec, and New Hampshire, and New York, and in France. 3D print, send designs. So precision seeders take the digital design and print that anywhere on Earth to benefit. So past generations can benefit from future generations can benefit from past knowledge. And we can take so we have right now the ability to take the millions of years of genetic code that has been refined, just like you imagine, like a memory stick, an open source design that's been evolved, and we've helped evolve those seeds, exchange it through our tool that's just 5,000 days old, our internet, and create a deep topsoil future. And so I just want to end before we start our panel discussion here by bringing it back down to agriculture as a shared endeavor, and that the end product isn't better tools. It's a shared process of better environmental understanding and a process by which we all can build on past accomplishments and benefit future generations. I like to think of agriculture as a multi-generational team sport. And it is the way in which we interact positively, potentially, and improving our environment. Agriculture essentially is the way in which we change the environment for the better. And it doesn't have to just decrease environmental resilience and diversity. It can also increase diversity. It's really our choice. So thank you. I know I'm over time.
Aren't you inspired? Goodness gracious. We have our sustainable bottles. They're noisy, but they cause no waste. And they're very nicely designed. Actually, before I came down here today, I was at our IBM Watson research facility. And I tell you that because it was a day where we had 150 students from Newburgh Free Academy, which is a pretty rough urban school district upstate here now north. And they're all in a mentoring program around engineering. We call it P-Tech, but that's really not the point. My point was to see 15-year-olds inspiring me. Not just going and getting inspired by professionals who are taking time out, which is a good thing to do, and I'm sure you all do it, but that I came away inspired. And then I sit here today and, whatever you're thinking about the world we're in today, you have to feel pretty inspired after listening to what's going on here. Let's give them a round of applause. I was listening and I was thinking, not knowing exactly what you're all going to say in my opening remarks. I'm going to fall off the edge here. The thing that I was referring to when we were doing the Smarter Cities work is the idea of thinking ahead but getting going, right? And we saw that here, that you all started something that's quite remarkable, but it needs to be sustained for a significant amount of time to truly be successful. So I wanted to ask, actually I want to start with you, Laura, because you have this impressive list of advocates and sponsors and people that are interested. How do you keep them motivated?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting in the context of this project. We have a consistent communication with the federal and municipal bodies based on the allocation of the funding and how the project is actually funded and resourced in a way. So that's inherent to the process, so that's inevitable. Secondary to that, related to the community stakeholders and the organizations that are not necessarily federal organizations, but more community, active community members and the organizations that they're part of. We've identified very early in this process a community advisory committee, a community advisory group called the CAG. And we set up CAG meetings usually on every third week or once a month at a minimum, where the CAG is invited and within the CAG there are about 40 members which represent a wide range of interests. So everything from somebody from the housing authority, somebody from particular organizations in the study area that are very important. And we make sure that if they can't be there, they send a representative, but we make very well known the status updates and the project updates and when they'll be shared with the CAG. The public is invited to those meetings generally as well. It's not that they're closed, but at least we're kind of covering all our bases and sharing on a consistent basis. And that's actually been quite effective in terms of both, but it requires a lot of diligence from our side as well.
Yeah, but that's the key, right? Not
Yeah.
only the diligence, but to convene local interested people, which is really how all of these things succeed. So Robert, you're inspired, and this is your passion. You were kind of one of the brainchildren of this fantastic concept, right? And it's expanding, and you're getting involved in so many other things. So what are you doing to make sure that, how do you take something like this where you're putting so much energy for it to help train and develop local people and to get sponsorship? How do you keep that going?
Well, one of the ways that I do that is, one, I definitely try to use my internship at Google. because like as I stated, when we got to the part about the digital stewards program, like really, like regardless of like Red Hook Wi-Fi or anything like that, it's really the stewards that are really like helping to maintain this network, and they are really the people that are like really benefiting from it, because you know they gain work from it. So they get paid to be in the program and to like learn that stuff, and I mean, just working with them while I was there at RHI, I just noticed like a lot of the stuff that we were doing was changing their lives, and we were giving them something that they haven't received in a very long time. It's like something that's feasible. You know, they hear a lot of things from like big government structures telling them, you can get this if you sign these papers, you know, but you know they get let down by a lot of that stuff. So I feel like using the wireless network and the Digital Stewards program, we're actually giving them something that they can touch and feel and see themselves moving somewhere with.
What a brilliant insight. Thanks. So Dorn, I spent some time at IBM working on helping develop open source software years ago. And so when I was reading about FarmHack, I was thinking about that as well. And it was interesting because there were a lot of participants, a lot of people were involved, and the idea of sharing, you know, was a good thing. But remember that, you know, a company like IBM or the IT industry, you know, they're not all altruistic necessarily, right? There's money to be made, and it was very confusing to people how you could sustain such a thing. And the realization was, well, if you take away the expense that you're spending on this basic need, then, you know, advancing further would be advantageous to everybody. I'm just curious, you know, what is I know this isn't necessarily a business model per se, but for each individual participant it probably is. So how did the prosperity make its way into the system?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we had to answer a lot early on in the process. But I think just to really acknowledge the work that had been done on the open source software world is really important, because we couldn't do what we do without the open source software movement before. And I also feel like the work, that the concept of open source hardware was also pioneered before us. And I think that the key that for our project is that we're not competing on the communications and the technology and so forth. It's that the people participating are participating because they're trying to find the tool that works for them. They're not trying to create a business around the tool. They're trying to find a solution for their local problem. And that's the business. It's from production rather than protection. So, and I think that's where the shift is. And it's interesting right now, there seems to be more and more acceptance of this in other fields as well, but in agriculture right now, there's the new Foundation for Food and Agriculture, and the head of Sally Rocky, who's now heading that organization, is talking about a pre-competitive space. So that we're creating an environment where we can all collaborate on moving our understanding of systems further and then compete at the end. And so if you think about, a restaurant metaphor might be a good example, right? So we could live in a town where the only ingredients are, you know, hot dogs and eggs, right? And then all the restaurants, they can come up with their own recipes to make them better, but they're pretty limited, you know, limited ingredients. And by the way, recipes are not patentable, right? But what we're working through is to try to create abundance and diversity so that all the restaurants in the community have the best possible ingredients, and then we all benefit, right? And so I think that's the model, is to create that pre-competitive space and to be competing not on the ingredients, but on what we do with them, how all the creativity and the wonderful outcomes we can get from that.
That's fantastic too, and it always opens up new opportunities. In the case of the hot dog and egg community, I think that somebody's going to create a cholesterol treatment model that's going to help address what might be the outcome of that. That's fantastic, and it's true. The idea that the proprietary models are extraordinarily expensive, and the differentiation doesn't occur until you get to the next level. So that's really a great insight too. And, I want to ask you all a question about data, and just maybe think about how you access and use it. And the reason I do is because it's important to me and to IBM, of course, but only because we're in a world where many of the things that you talked about were gleaning new insights from the availability of data that heretofore we couldn't get at, right? You know, we at IBM like to say we're in a cognitive world. It's a very heady, no pun intended, a very heady idea, but it's true, right? So, unbeknownst to maybe perhaps many of you, we bought the weather company. And in doing so, we thought it was an interesting endeavor for a couple of reasons. One, these people are data geniuses. During Superstorm Sandy, their website took 26 billion hits a day without going down, which was pretty remarkable. We think we're able to scale. We thought they have a pretty good model. But the more interesting thing they do is they're able to take weather and not only isolate it down to a very small area because of the data, and help farmers understand the effects of rain or drought on soil and what kind of crops to plant, but help theme parks, when to open, and help sports venues, and help commodity traders. And you can imagine distribution channels. You can imagine the value of weather if you can get it down to that micro location, right? And so we're using data for all sorts of things, and that weather is just one example. But every one of you is dependent on data, not only to execute your strategy, to start with something that you know you get your arms around, and then to be able to prove that you have an idea that people think is a breakthrough. So how do you do that? How do you get the information you need, or where do you get it? Maybe that's not even the question. How do you leverage it? Let's start with Laura.
I can start. I can say in our case, it's been really interesting because I'll call it hard data and soft data, for lack of a better term. So, as a starting point of a feasibility study, we collected all kinds of data from government, from different sources about, okay, we wanted to put in a resist component that was a kind of, a way to address coastal storm surge. So what is the condition of the bulkheads? Where can we build a wall? Can we put it there? Is it, stable enough structurally? Do we have to build a new structure? Does that compound the cost? I mean, there's a lot of very technical, very feasibility related issues that you have to have that input of data to understand and be able to come up with a proposal that will float eventually within a lot of the not only approvals bodies, but eventually when it's put in place, it'll do what we say it's going to do, right? And then there's the kind of other side of it, which is the soft data, which we've collected through the community engagement process. So we can propose something that has, a kind of resist barrier, that has some kind of amenity embedded in it, that might serve the community, and it might be a bike storage location. If they come to us and say, actually, we don't store bikes there, we would rather have an information kiosk where you can get this, that, and the other, that's not a feasibility related type of data collection. Either of those two solutions will work, but it's a solution around what do people actually want and what would people really benefit from, and how can we do this in the most both efficient but also kind of beneficial way as a whole. So it's been an interesting push and pull from our side in terms of hard versus soft data and technical versus more emotional and community-based input.
Yeah, because that's a lot to absorb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert, the idea that you're creating new opportunities for young people who might not have the ability to get opportunities, to get the necessary education to do the things that they're doing, it's extraordinary. And to demonstrate the success, and so that people want to replicate it, you must be able to show the results in some way or another, other than the fact that you're getting more hubs and more access. Because it seems to me that the community seems, and I don't know how to measure this, it seems to run better. Is that a fair observation?
Yeah, that's pretty true. Like when we first started, when we first deployed the network, we were seeing about like 500 users, like over like a span of a year. This is when the network was like kind of small. So then we were like, how is it that we have this wireless infrastructure that's built here and like no one is using it? There's like maybe 11 to 12,000 people that live in the Red Hook community. It's like out of all these people, no one is using it. So then we rethought it and we're like, maybe it's the way that we're like promoting the network. So we moved toward more efforts to promote the network and like really push the word out there to like communities and community centers and stuff so that they can pass the word down to people that live in the community. And then from 2012, coming into like 2015, we hit about like, we were seeing an average of like 600 users a week. And we were like, wow, this is insane. Because now before, seeing 500 users in a year, you're like, you know, if a router goes down, you know, we can take care of it, you know, like the next day. But now it's like, we're seeing these results like on a weekly basis. So it's like really, it's like really pushed us to like step up our game and like make sure things are like up and running and all that stuff.
It just really amplifies the success when you see a level of commitment from people who are involved in the community where they're actually doing some of these interesting things, and I think that's what makes it work. And you're seeing everybody is convening people with a common interest and a common set of objectives, and you know, so you know, Dorn, I'll ask you the same thing. I mean, your world is awash in data, right? I keep making these unintentional puns, and I don't mean to. Nonetheless, but it probably resides in so many different places. How do you make heads or tails out of it?
You know, it's managing not just the different data types, but also a distributed data structure, I think, is one of our big challenges. And creating incentives for documentation and creating high-quality data is one of our big challenges. Because the documentation of hardware in particular is incredibly important to be able to exchange the knowledge associated with that. So the physical object, I mean, one of the things that we came to realize is that hardware is, if open source hardware is software, because it's a process of documenting the physical object, describing it in enough detail so that it can be replicated anywhere. And each object has a different type of description. But the way in which you exchange it is just the way you would code. It's an assembly instruction, just like the DNA. And so understanding that process has been a big part of our challenge, and then also creating tools to facilitate that process of documentation and a culture that values that process. But then also putting that in action, and then all the associated data, so that that physical, that object, that tool is in use, and understanding it in context, and in what context it works, in what weather conditions, and what soil conditions, and what economic situations, and so forth. So that context, that local recommendation, and finding the tool, the problem statement, or the challenge that an individual farmer is having, and linking their challenge with somebody else in a potentially other side of the world that solved it similarly. So it's a data question and translation of that data into this sort of common format.
Yeah, that's a level of precision that we don't necessarily associate with hardware, particularly any of us that have ever put together something we bought at IKEA or somewhere else, where you see those levels of drawings and they don't quite give you the information you necessarily need. So what I'd like to do is we'll change it up here. What I'd like maybe we could get 2 of these mics, and I want you folks who took your time to come to have an opportunity to participate and think about some questions you might want to ask our panel, because goodness gracious, I know I have a million, and I'm just so excited about what I've heard here today. And the only thing I'll say while you're thinking about that, and Susanna will just raise your hand, she'll come and get you with the microphone, is the thing that comes back to me from what we started, or what maybe I started, and when we kicked off the day, the evening, is we were talking about this earlier, the courage it takes to do something like this. This is what did you say, how much money was it? $230 million project. This is taking a level of complexity in a community that has no idea how to do things like this, and not only making it available and accessible, but desirable, and people are passionate about it. And then to talk about changing an industry, right? These people have courage, and that's what gets things done. But the second thing, and this is my biggest takeaway, is every one of these folks was very much involved in the implementation. There are a lot of people with big ideas, right? How to get things done is equally important. Why you need data, why you need passion, why you need fortitude, why you need courage. And so if you're like me, I think you're going to be feeling much differently after leaving here tonight than when we came in, and hopeful, because I know I am. Not that I was unhopeful before, but this has just been fantastic. So I want to hear, Susanna, you have a microphone, we have some questions, we have one there, then we have one up here, so let's go.
Hi, this is for Robert. First of all, congratulations on such a brilliant idea and implementing it. So I wonder if some of the commercial Wi-Fi companies, have they given you a hard time at all, Verizon or Time Warner, saying, you know, you're kind of infringing on what we do, if that's been an issue? And my other question is how would you like to see your project go forward? Would you like it to be turned into a commercial industry? Would you like to start to charge people for your Wi-Fi?
Well, first things first. This is not my idea. Tony Schloss is the founder of Red Wi-Fi. He cannot be here tonight, but I worked very closely with Tony. I was a Wi-Fi administrator, so I installed most of the routers and stuff, and I worked on the ground with the digital stewards and teaching them how to do a lot of the technical stuff. So I'm really closely knitted to this project, but it's not my idea. I wish it was. But we haven't received much pushback from big ISPs. When we first started the program, we tried to reach out to Verizon and Time Warner, but it was kind of hard to get to them. And then we had this whole other factor was how is it going to really benefit them? But luckily, when we started this initiative, there was a local ISP in the Reddit community by the name of Brooklyn Fiber, and we spoke with him, and he was really down for the idea, and he had just moved to the community, and he wanted to find ways to help in any way that he could, and he had just started his company too, so this was really good for him too, because we got a lot of press for it. But so RHI, we purchased a set amount of bandwidth from Brooklyn Fiber, and RHI pays Brooklyn Fiber monthly for the bandwidth for the wireless network. And as far as commercial, I mean, I would hope that it wouldn't turn into a big commercial business or anything. But what my hope for it is that it encourages big structural companies and organizations to push initiatives like this, because our main thing is that we live in a digital age, and access like this should be something that's mandatory. Tony always says that he wish that in the future he can move into a new house and have a Ethernet jack on his wall, just you used to move into any house and have a landline and be able to call at least 911. The future should move in that direction, that we can move into a new house and have a jack in the wall that we can just plug in and have internet access, since this is where the world is moving to. This is where the world is moving.
That's a great question. You think about the involvement of Brooklyn Fiber was a local entity who thought, this is where I live, work, play, learn, worship. I want to be a part of the community, and that's really illustrative. And of course, the big guys always are getting disrupted, right? And that's what the whole nature of this open technology can bring to us. We had another question, Susanna. I know we had one up here.
Raise your hand high.
Sure.
All right, there we are.
Hi. So I have a question about the Digital Stewards Program. You mentioned there's a process where they earn badges and there are different levels. I was wondering if you could explain that process a little bit more. How long is that process? What happens afterwards? Is there a graduation? And then what do they do after they've graduated, if that is the case?
Yeah. So the first level, they do IT support, professional development for the first 2 weeks that they're in the program. The program is overall, it used to be a year long, but then we right now we're sort of in a redesign phase. We're trying to see what works, because the program is still in development. So yeah, it's about six to 7 months long. The first 2 weeks they do professional development, and they get very soft IT skills. And then following their first week, we give them different projects and stuff, so that they can pick up project management skills and different things like that. And then in the summer, we participate with another organization in the community called Dance Theater, etc., where they host what they call a digital boot camp, and that's where they learn like media skills. They learn like graphic design, video editing, and they learn how to use like DSLR cameras and all that stuff. And then they get to like produce content for businesses in the Reddit community. Actually, I think this year they actually went beyond the Reddit community and they did a couple of pieces for businesses that were on like Carroll Street and stuff. And then after that, they do graduate and they get like these nice pins. Although when I started, I didn't get to graduate because it was like the very first class. But I still got my little pin now. I wear it sometime. But yeah, they get to graduate, and then RHI will help them look for work after that.
So is there something similar, well not similar necessarily, is there some sort of community recognition that goes along with being involved in FarmHack?
Yeah, I think that's the currency in the free economy, is the recognition that you did that initial post. So part of the process of when you post a design is that you're the root of that design in perpetuity. You get recognition for your contribution. And I think there's a sort of a social capital associated with that that's really important. And we're still learning how to enhance that kind of recognition for contributions, but it's a really important part.
So what do you think? We'll do one more, so two more. Any questions? Did you have a question? Susanna, we have one up here. He's been trying to ask here, and then we'll go back there. How about that?
Can you raise your hand high?
Right here in the front row.
Okay.
You know, we have smart cities and we have resilient cities. So Bloomberg has 100 smart cities, and which is a knowledge, information, media management. And then we have resilient cities, Rockefeller. My question, is actually to the curator, because the skill set, the smart skill set or the resilient skill set is missing. Then you have cities on one side, and then you have the smart and the resilient on the other side. So like if you have a knowledge management company, information technology company, so they don't have the city governance skill set. So where is that, design education skill set sort of fits into this scenario? So there is a disconnect between the smart, so if you sort of look at the case of Hoboken and an architectural design engineering company sort of jumping into it, we don't know how these things work. They may not work. So
there's probably.
So that's exactly the question about the design education.
I could just start it up and then we can. So it's a good question, but I think that it's a little in practice it's a little more positive. What's going on is a little more positive than that. In that there are think tanks, there are not-for-profits, there are commercial enterprises such as IBM or General Electric or Veolia. There's companies in all different fields, and they're collaborating with communities and societies. We saw this in Rochester, New York, where the hospitals, when a lot of industries left Rochester, New York, the hospitals, the local communities, the supermarkets, the people that were in charge of the parks department, technology, academia, companies like IBM and others, collaborated. There was like 7 or 8 different constituencies that collaborated to do just what you're probing at, to gain that information sharing, and it all comes in the convening. The convening, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we showed our kind of interdisciplinary team for this project in particular. One of the reasons why is that there was a lot of hesitation whether an architecture firm was the right, let's say, body to take on this challenge. And we don't think that we are in absentia, but we had economic advisors, we had kind of landscape and people related specifically to the assessment of water. We worked with a Dutch engineering firm called Royal Huiskening on the competition to tell us exactly the engineering capabilities and potentials for a resilient water, essentially retention system, which is one of the main things that we were planning. So it requires a very interdisciplinary approach, and what's nice is that the profession, as suggested, is really moving in this direction, and in our experience, so is education. So I teach at the University of Pennsylvania in the Penn School of Design, and there are so many interdisciplinary studios where architects are working with landscape architects, are working with engineers, are working with, toward a resilient project that comes at it from these multiple directions. And even collaborating with like the business school or some of these more kind of financial, economic, feasibility related modeling to combine with the kind of design strategies that they're proposing so that it becomes a comprehensive proposal rather than something done in a vacuum, right? So it's very, I think there needs to be maybe more proliferation of the fact that those strategies are preferred and being kind of deployed, especially within the education system. Sometimes it happens on the basis of someone who's very interested in it, and so they'll initiate it. Maybe it needs to be a bit more institutionalized as such, but I think it's really moving in that direction in a positive way.
I wanted to add, Dorn, and we had another question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add in a more general sense that I think one of the things that we're interested in is the general democratization and a more participatory design process and making the design tools more accessible to more people. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here, is breaking down some of those barriers and being able to bring more people together at different parts of the process. And in our case, with the open source design process, also lower the risk in that early stage so that you don't have to have as much return later on, so that everybody's starting again at that higher spot.
Yeah, that's true. And there is more sharing that's going on. I mean, you asked the Dutch, right? The Dutch have been fighting the sea for how many thousands of years, right? And the other thing I'll add is in your presentation, you had that circle chart with the different departments. That chart came from us. I think I might have even created that chart 5 years ago. So there's collaboration happening organically, which is very exciting. And we had one last question, and then we'll wrap up because I know we're out of time.
Hi. So in terms of implementation, which is equally or more important than ideation, I was wondering about the Hoboken project, how to get involved and getting on board stakeholders, since you showed us a long list of them, and how to identify them and getting them involved in order to make.
Sure. So there will be a public hearing first, just after the first of the year, about the environmental impact statement. Following the submission of the environmental impact statement, or a public hearing about the draft EIS, then the environmental impact statement will be submitted, and then we'll start the detailed design process. And there, at that point, the kind of engagement will restart. So both the community advisory group and then the larger public meetings, all of which are published online. So I can give you the website. New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection is actually the umbrella under which the project is happening. They have a dedicated website where they post every CAG meeting, every public meeting, all of the kind of moments. We have drop-in sessions from time to time where you can come and hear what we're up to. And they post those at least 2 weeks in advance. So the best thing to do is just to join the next one of those that takes place, and then you can speak to any of us about further involvement. We'd be happy to engage on a more local level if that's of interest.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Laura. So we're going to wrap up. It's 8 o'clock. We have 3 people here. I don't know if you can stick around. If you had questions you didn't have a chance to ask. But I just want to say that for all of you to show up, this is a pretty good crowd for something like this on a Thursday night, right? And that's a testament to how committed and passionate people are about the topic as well. So that's very exciting. And in closing, I would like to say, not just on behalf of IBM and Cooper Hewitt, thank you, but to our panelists, Laura, Robert, and Dorn, let's close by giving them a nice hand.